Welcome to Looking at Lucasfilm, the podcast with a different perspective on the world of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and all of the other entities that George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy, and the rest of the team at Lucasfilm have dreamed up over the past 40 years. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host, the one, the only Dan Zehr, and I are recording this on Wednesday, June 24th. So Dan, the school year has officially ended for you, right?
Yeah, I've been out for a good month at least, if not a little bit longer. So
Okay.
it's been an interesting summer. Definitely not the usual because you can't travel really as much, or it's not advised to. But this is the first summer in about 12 years I haven't taught summer school, so that's been a nice break.
Well, but at the same time, for anybody who's been paying attention to your teaching with Star Wars column over at starwars.com, the education continues. I have to admit, I've really been loving this now weekly series of columns. The one that just dropped today was what about Ray and the challenges of venturing outside your comfort zone, right?
That's right, and the power is. I mean, it does kind of mirror the Campbellian refusal of the call, and how many people, and I noticed this in when I was younger, and my children too. At first blush, when you're asked to do something or you need to do something that you're not used to, you're not comfortable with, it's scary, and there's a lot of discomfort there. And sometimes people just won't even attempt it. And I think that's an important journey that you have to take.
But the other thing, frankly, what I've been enjoying about this is you're not, you're an equal opportunity teacher here. It's you don't just concentrate on the films. We've had pieces just over the last month or so where you touched on lessons from the Clone Wars, likewise Rebels, even the prequels.
Yeah.
So, no, I have to admit, I've really been enjoying them, though. Important distinction between the column you just did today about Ray and the lessons she learned as part of the Force Awakens is there's a difference between moving outside of one's comfort zone and abandoning safety practices, which
Yes.
uh
That's a
yeah.
transition right there. I like that.
Well, I'm subtle though. Did you notice how subtle that
Yes.
was?
Very smooth.
There we go. Well, look, I'm not going to lie to you, Dan. Again, you just like me have to be disappointed that this year's Star Wars celebration, which was to be held in August 27th through the 30th at the Anaheim Convention Center, was canceled back on June 15th. And event organizers were very upfront about the reasons. They said the health and safety of our fans, attendees, exhibitors, guests, and staff is always our number one priority. And due to the global impact of the COVID-19 virus, and after speaking with local and state authorities about the latest health guidelines related to indoor conventions, we have made the decision to cancel Star Wars Celebration for 2020. And um, upside is they at least gave us a date for when the next one is, which 2022, right? Basically, kind of in the same window, or
Yeah, August 18th to the 21st, 2022. And I'm very glad that was I thought that was a very nice balm, because where a lot
Mhm,
of people were disappointed, not surprised. And you and I talked about this quite a bit on the last Looking at Lucasfilm.
mhm.
It was something that needed to happen. Of course, with the recent news about Disneyland now, it seemed even less likely that would have happened anyway. You got
Yeah.
to keep people safe. And quite honestly, there really isn't a ton to promote right now. Yes, they're getting ready for season 2 of The Mandalorian, and that's wonderful. But usually these are organized around films, and
Mhm.
there isn't a film until 2022 anyway. And of course, I'm very disappointed. I mean, my goodness, just off the top of my head, I had 7 specific things that I had planned for celebration alone. And those things aren't going to happen this time, but that doesn't mean they won't happen in the future.
This is true. This is true. Though, to be clear here, actually, Lucasfilm will have 2 films dropping in 2022.
Oh, that
If
the man with the hat.
the man with the hat, also Dan's good close-up personal friend, if we've
That's
seen that
right.
wonderful photograph. Interesting thing. Did you see David Cope's interview last week with the Hollywood Reporter, where he was talking about? Interesting thing. He left Indiana Jones 5 when Spielberg stepped away from the project back in February to allow James Mangold, the talented gentleman behind Logan, to come in and take over Indy 5. David felt that it was only fair that James be allowed to build his own crew, creative team, and that sort of thing, and bring in his own screenwriter. But what I found kind of interesting about the Hollywood Reporter uh, story, Dan, was that he actually, in a way, talked about how it was a kindness that oh, I don't have to do Indiana Jones 5 anymore. He talked about the burden of when you're a writer on a project like this. Well, you have no choice; it has to be great. It's just quoting from his interview in the Hollywood Reporter. First and the third film in that series were utterly beloved, and utterly beloved is a high bar. So I did a couple of versions of the last one that I thought were good, and the last one in particular. But it didn't quite come together. Steven couldn't do it in the end, and whatever, and it just didn't come together. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And if there's going to be another Indiana Jones movie, I think James Mangold is a great guy to explore it. Certainly, what he did with Logan is remarkable, and along using Frank Scott's great script. Um, but it's okay. Yeah, usually by the time on a project like this, you either get fired or they move on to somebody else, or the project just evolves away from you. By that time, you're secretly a little bit relieved because at least you don't have to keep banging your head against it anymore.
You know what this
So,
reminds me of? Have you ever seen the behind the scenes Seinfeld stuff where Larry David, the co-creator, would talk about whenever he got news they would renew the show or they would extend the season, especially in season one. He was so frustrated and stressed out, and he thought, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to come up with? What am I going to think about? Now I got to be funny again." And he was just so stressed out about it. Obviously, he made gold, and I think Larry David is a genius. Anyway, but it kind of
no,
reminds me of that. The pressure must be extraordinary.
well, yeah, and face it, the challenge this time around, especially given you know uh, the whole notion of going back to the well for the fifth time, and as Cope mentioned, the original Raiders and Last Crusade being as beloved as they are, you still are a fan of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, though, right? Or
Yeah, it's my second favorite indie movie.
hmm, okay. Um, I don't know.
Usually that
Again,
gets more of a reaction when I say that. Usually
well,
people are
it's just
surprised.
I don't know. The weird part of for me, I think one of the reasons that I just have trouble connecting with uh the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is the fact that so much of it is so obviously CG, whereas I mean, half the fun for me of the first Raiders was watching Harrison Ford get dragged behind troop carriers, or
Oh yeah.
just frantically scampering ahead of giant boulders and that sort of thing. It was very much a film. I mean, again, it was a loving tribute to those those 1930s adventure serials, and the fact that they did so much stuff as practically as they did. I mean, there's just between the army ants and the waterfalls, and then the flying saucer, it's just sort of like I'm actually kind of hoping that Mangold understands that's part of the appeal. And I mean, don't get me wrong, just from the opening of the actual Ark of the Covenant in the first film. I mean,
But it looks
these
good
films,
still, yeah.
yeah, I mean, these are special effects extravaganzas, but there's got to be a balancing act between CG and practical. And I just feel like with Skull, they kind of buried the needle in the wrong direction.
Well, there was a lot
But
of, I mean, they don't need to do CGI gophers, that's for sure, or whatever things are. But what I like about Crystal Skull is
yeah,
the fact that Indiana Jones, from the third one to the fourth one, goes from being the son
hmm
with the estranged father to
hmm
being the father of the estranged son, and the roles are switched. He very much becomes sort of the Sean Connery figure, but with the indie swagger and grit. And I just think that was a very, very clever way to subvert the narrative. And I also love every time he's on screen with Karen Allen, I think they have legitimate gold, and it's actually a great showcase for how much of a wonderful actor Harrison Ford is.
see, now you made me want to go watch it again. All
Yeah,
right,
you're
that's
welcome. Put it on your list.
nah,
I just
no,
focus
that
on Ford, and you can't go wrong. And the
okay.
CGI,
There
yeah,
you
I give you that, but you know. My
All
word is better than someone who gives Toy Story 2, such poor billing.
well, okay. What folks don't know here is that Dan is going to be recording a show later this evening with Drew Taylor, who just recently did a piece for Collider that I gave him great grief about ranking Toy Story 2 as the seventh most popular or the seventh best film in the Toy Story franchise. Again, Dan, I think we may have missed that head injury moment with Drew. I mean, you think he would have
I
brought it
know.
up, you
I
know?
know. Well, I applaud and I enjoyed the grief you gave him. It was great fun.
Well, I'm happy to do it on your behalf. Anyway, speaking of things that have been pushed back, postponed, and again, another thing that Dan and I were legitimately looking forward to doing was the Disneyland After Dark, the Star Wars night, which was going to be held on opening night of this year's Star Wars celebration. In fact, I was already stressing about, how little sleep I was probably going to get that night and how I was going to get through the second day of the convention. But that's no longer a problem, right? This
That's
has
correct.
been pushed off. We don't know when it will be rescheduled. In fact, Dan just alluded to the other thing that uh, literally half hour out before we started recording. And I won't bore you folks. I wrote a giant chunk for the show where I talked about, hey, we need to be ready because given what's happening with COVID flare ups in Florida and California, that it's quite likely that both Disneyland and Disney World, the reopenings of those theme parks, which have previously been announced, that what was it? Disneyland was supposed to be reopening on July 17th. Its birthday, and Walt Disney World was July 11th. The Magic Kingdom and Disney Hollywood Studios, and I want to say July 15th, Epcot and the studios.
Yep, that's right.
And uh, well, what happened? Those are still held. The Florida parks supposedly are holding other dates, but as Dan and I were getting ready to record, a press release came out of Disneyland. Do you have it there, Dan? Do you want to give it a quick read?
We previously announced the proposed phased reopening of our theme parks for July 17th, pending government approvals. We developed enhanced health and safety protocols for both cast and guests at Shanghai Disney Resort, Hong Kong Disneyland Resort, and Walt Disney World Resort that have been approved, allowing us to reopen in a responsible manner and bring our cast members back to work. The state of California has now indicated that it will not issue theme park reopening guidelines until sometime after July 4th. Given the time required for us to bring thousands of cast members back to work and restart our business, we will have no choice but to delay the reopening of our theme parks and resort hotels until we receive approval from government officials. Once we have a clearer understanding of when guidelines will be released, we expect to be able to communicate a reopening date. And then it goes on to say that downtown Disney District will still going to reopen July 9th, and then there's a little bit of extra stuff and thank yous, and it's pretty rough. I mean, I'm sure if you're a cast member working, I bet you're convoluted because you're on furlough. You want to
Mhm.
get back and get paid, but you also don't want to put yourself in a dangerous spot. So it's definitely tough. But that's kind of why I'm not sure that Disney World will follow suit or not, because this is purely being dictated by the state of California itself. So I don't know.
Yeah, but my concern, and look, just over the past 48 hours, and in fact, this is one of the things, the reason that California did this. They had 13,000 new cases of COVID-19 just in the past 48 hours. On the other hand, earlier today, Florida reported more than 5,500 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours, which, by the way, shattered Florida's previous one day reporting record by more than 1,500 people. I, it just, for me, um, and again, face it, the interesting thing about Disney is it understands its relationship with the public. That, think about it. Whenever people go to Disney, the Disney theme park, they talk about how clean they are, and the elaborate safety mechanisms and that sort of thing. So that they're they're really desperate to maintain that reputation. And COVID-19 is making that difficult. So I just I'm especially concerned given that you know Florida, what with its rush to reopen it, and I don't want to get political here. I completely understand why Florida, rushed to come back. Rush to come back. The tourism industry there is a huge part of that state's bottom line. But if you talk with the folks back in Burbank who work at Disney's corporate headquarters, they genuinely believe that Florida kind of dropped the ball here, bobbled the reopening of the state, and the fear is that the only way to contain COVID. And let's be honest here. There's also 22 other states that have had flare-ups of COVID just over the past week.
Yeah.
That we may have to do a reset of the stay at home, shelter in place, safer at home thing, which that is going to make it difficult to reopen the parks. Anyway.
Well, I mean, I was listening to you guys talking about the NBA too, and I've got quite a bit of background on this one as well. But
Mhm.
that's a tough one because the NBA was all set to kind of go back in their bubble, but they've got some players from the Lakers and
Just
Dwight
today.
Howard not
Yeah.
wanting to play.
Mhm.
And
And
it's problematic now for the Major League Baseball. It's a little bit different because you've got someone like Garrett
mhm,
Cole, who's one of the best pitchers in baseball, won the Cy Young 2 years in a row.
mhm,
He wants to play, but the problem is his wife is
mhm.
pregnant. So
Yeah.
you go out and then do all that, and then you come home, and that's just a risk that no one wants to take. Plus, the other alternative is he doesn't get to see his family for months. So, I mean,
Mhm.
this is not only affecting theme park goers and fans of the Lucasfilm franchise, but people from all across the spectrum.
No, absolutely, and in fact, it's interesting you bring up the Laker player because his explanation is like, "Look, I have a 6-year-old
Yeah,
who's has had trouble recovering from respiratory
respiratory.
illnesses."
That's right.
And it just, I mean, and you can't argue with that. It's just
No.
sort of like a guy has put his family first, and that's what you're supposed to do.
And it
So,
means even more because the Lakers, everyone pretty much expects him to win the championship. So he's
mhm.
basically saying, "I would forgo a ring for my family," which is incredible and really what it should be.
No, that's it exactly. All right. So anyway, I know we're making people crazy here by talking about COVID again. So, Dan, we're making a hard right here, and
We're an outlet and a safe place to land.
there we go. Okay. So talk to me about the Star Wars Squadron play video that dropped this past week. What do we think?
I mean, it looks gorgeous. I mean, you've
Mhm,
got tons of in-world connections and Easter eggs, and
mhm,
this really takes the whole notion of the old X-wing or TIE fighter PC games from the mid '90s to another level because now you get to operate through the PlayStation,
mhm.
and it looks glorious. I'm assuming it'll be canonically tied into things. You have a bunch of different story modes. There's actually like a 6-minute trailer. I think it's 6 minutes or so, showing
Yeah.
all the in-game different
Mhm,
things you can do, all the different ways you can customize pilots, the different modes themselves, which I know we're going to talk about. And it looks great. I'm personally not a big flyer pilot type of guy. I much prefer the Battlefront stuff,
mhm.
but I do think it looks gorgeous and it's going to make a lot of people really happy. And EA has really doubled down on Star Wars, so this is great.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the Battlefront game because evidently it was while they were working on this, and you talked about the flying games of the 1990s. It was a bunch of guys who were being nostalgic about that how much they enjoyed those, but the one piece that they were missing was the chance to actually be in the cockpit, be the one who was doing the flying. So, it just, and I guess for me, what I find kind of ironic about this is, Star Wars Squadron isn't going to be out till October of this year, October 7th to be exact. And as you mentioned, Xbox, PC, and the PS4, a $39.99 price point. But did you see just today they brought back the Star Wars Episode 1 racer game? For
Yeah.
the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4?
It's pretty fun. That's a very, very nostalgic game. And a lot of the fun of episode one, I noticed a lot of the fun of the Star Wars films are kind of surrounded by these video games. It's going to bring back a lot of memories for certain generations of people. But to be honest, I'm more excited about the complete Skywalker Saga Lego game that's coming out later in this year.
Wow,
Yeah.
that got by me. Now, mind you, I did see the the announcement of, what is it? The Amazon exclusive, Lego, the Mandalorian Razor Crest set. Um,
Yes.
1,023 pieces.
Hmm.
I have to admit, I am sorely tempted just because of the minifigs. What we have the Mandalorian, Grief Karga, the IG-11,
Hmm.
bounty hunter, plus the child who looks what he looks like a piece high. I mean, just teeny tiny,
Yeah.
itty bitty.
Like Drew
Um,
Taylor sized. Yeah.
oh, you were. All right. I didn't say that. Um,
By the way, this thing, it looks wonderful,
mhm,
and it was available for pre-order, oh gosh, a couple months ago, and I
mhm.
pre-ordered it the first day it came out. So I will send you lots of photos, and maybe we'll do a
I
video of it.
would I want to know how long this takes to put together because it just I have to admit this was the one I was sorely tempted by. I got previously I've looked at them and it just sort of like that looks really like too much work. Uh,
Mason is a Lego Jedi master, so
mhm.
I he and I will just open it up, and he'll just go to work, man. And plus, Lego's the best babysitter there ever was.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Just and yet still walking through a darkened room, stepping on one. That you can still say that.
Yes, not an ideal situation.
Okay. I'll tell you what, folks, when we get back, we'll continue talking about The Mandalorian.
Getting ready to step into your career era? Set yourself apart with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Hone your skills with apps like Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, and more, powered with the latest in creative AI. Students save over 55% so you can build a portfolio you're proud of. Launch your future with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Visit adobe.com/students to learn more.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana lets you buy your next car on your terms. Explore a massive inventory online, filter for what matters, and find your perfect match. Then choose delivery to your home or pick it up at one of Carvana's iconic car vending machines. Every car also comes with a 7-day money-back guarantee, so you can make sure it's the right fit. Buy your car on Carvana. Delivery or pickup fees may apply. Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
Carvana.
Breathe deep. Imagine your legs more limber in Duluth Trading Double Flex Denim. Envision euphorically squatting for that can of suds, bending for your toolbox in a state of bliss, lunging for your laser level on a whole new level. Relax and allow the flex to fill you with ability. Find your inner flex in Double Flex Denim only at Duluth Trading.
And we're back. Okay. I have to admit, Dan will corroborate this. I sent Dan a note the day that the 8th episode of Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian,
Yeah,
aired on Disney Plus,
early
and
in the morning you did, very early in
oh
the morning.
yeah, I was
Yeah,
actually, it was one of those days where I had to knock out some stuff, so I was up as early as 5:30 and figured I'm up early. My treat is I get to watch, Mandalorian first, the last chapter of the Mandalorian behind the scenes things first thing. And this one was the cherry on the sundae. They had so many great behind the scenes stories, whether it was Mark Hamill's cameo as one of the droids working
Evening
in
9 to 9, the bartender. Yes.
yeah, and I
Yes, you
I
did.
I didn't put it together the first time I watched it with they I think it was Favreau who talked about, remember in the first film, hey, you can't bring your droids in here. And
That's right.
in the Mandalorian, the droids are behind the bar. They're the ones serving, and they perhaps own the place. But there was so many great stories, whether it was the Kenner troop carrier. Did you notice that when it initially aired, Dan?
Oh
Or
yeah, because that thing is somewhat of a holy grail because when it came out,
Mhm.
it was something that a lot of people were interested in, but I mean, people like me were like, "Well, it's not in the movie. That's just something that sell a toy," and I didn't buy it. And then it became
Mhm.
one of the most coveted collectibles out there.
That's always the way.
It did show up
Um,
in Rebels, but this is the first time it was ever in a live action thing, so that was cool.
yeah. But at the same time, I love how they explained their conceit. The whole notion that this, basically the Mandalorian is your brother took all of the good Star Wars figures, so
Yeah,
you're you're now playing with the Ugnaughts and the IG-88, and that they came up with this amazing story. And again, snuck in the Kenner troop carrier. But I have to say, honestly, my favorite moment out of this particular episode was them showing the members of the 501st.
501st, yes.
Yeah, and who had no idea what they were being called in for. And
And they said
they
in many cases their armor looked better than what they had put together for the show.
Yeah, yeah, but I loved the fact that, here's, Favreau and Filoni insisting on getting their picture taken with these guys. That, they were so grateful that they turned out so the crowd scene and that final big battle could look as good as it did. And they kept praising the fact that, these guys know how to look great in armor. They've been doing it for years.
That's right.
Uh,
They
but
announced
yeah.
that at Celebration Chicago in the
Mhm,
Mandalorian panel, and it
mhm,
got an incredible amount of cheers because it's such a nice homage to
mhm.
this organization has been doing a lot of charity work for children for years and years. Well,
Mhm.
since the late 90s, since the special editions came out.
Yeah, but it was so nice to see, when they take off the helmets and it's a mother and a daughter,
Yeah.
or, and I would have never put that together, but it was such a nice moment out of a great series. And as I was saying at the top here, I actually sent Dan a note to the effect of I'm at a point where I think I like the Disney Gallery Mandalorian show better than the actual Mandalorian,
Yeah.
because just so many great behind the scenes stories, and just made it apparent that, these are guys who were working with cutting edge tech, but at the same time, they come from a place where they really love this material, these shows.
In that world.
Um,
And you've got I know you've got some we're gonna talk about here, but I really like the one where they show kind of start to finish of an episode and what that looks like.
mhm,
Taika Waititi, when he's interviewed, is always make sure everybody's listening in because he's going to say something funny or insightful.
mhm.
But the stuff with the music I thought was
Oh
particularly
no,
fascinating.
that another great episode. And speaking of which, though, um, how great was it to learn that the X-wing at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disney's Hollywood Studio, it says it's not just a proper creation; it was actually used in the making of the Mandalorian. That
It's so
they
cool.
they talked about basically swiping it en route to Florida, and then having to, I guess, rip out the innards so people could actually sit inside.
I
Seriously,
love
folks,
that.
yeah, if you have not been watching the Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, you're missing some great stuff. We should also mention the Star Wars Mandalorian, the art and imagery book that Titan was supposed to put out in March. It got rescheduled for August 4th, and I just got notice. In fact, just before we were doing the show here, that might be a little bit later. We're talking August 11th to the 19th, and I think that has more to do again with the situation that publishers are dealing with. But it's coming. It's coming.
But the art,
You
it's
know.
always the art books. The other books
Mhm.
are coming out on time. Everything else is coming on time, but it's always art books. Rebels, The Rise of Skywalker. Why always the art books?
Well, I think it's, I mean, I would think about it. The typically they're oversized. So it's not a question of, for example, with a novel, you can pack, and I'm hearkening back to my Barnes and Nobles days.
Mm.
That's like you could put say 10 art books in a box where you could put 24 novels in a box. They just packed differently. They could
Did you
be,
work at
and
Barnes and Noble?
I did,
So did I.
do it really?
Yeah.
When?
Well, when I went back, I switched careers to become a teacher, and so I spent about a year and a half when I was going back to school to get my teaching degree. I worked at Barnes and Noble on the weekends and when I was student teaching.
Well, that's the thing. Until I got the, when I moved back up to New England, and was just getting started writing for the web. That was sort of, Barnes and Noble definitely made out on the deal. It was one of these things where I would get paid and then turn around and immediately buy books. So it was like, eventually I had to break up with them because, I was definitely in the red. So, but anyway, speaking of books, did you see the first chapter of High Republic, Light of the Jedi that IGN published this past week?
Yes, absolutely wonderful, and almost unfair that we had to wait so long to read this first one.
Dan is not wrong. I genuinely enjoyed the setup here. Now, mind you, spoilers, folks. If you are, going to go ahead and read this book, which comes out in January. Dan and I are going to talk for a minute or two about this. So maybe either jump ahead or cover your ears and go la 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 la. But I have to admit that the setup is fascinating. The whole notion of the tragedy involving the Legacy Run, that that there's this freighter with 9,000 passengers headed for the Outer Rim that's traveling through hyperspace. There's something ahead of them in the hyperspace lane. They have this Captain Hedda Cassette, who's a 40-year veteran, and it has had lots of time behind the stick, and she does in fact manage to do the impossible. She manages to maneuver around the object that's ahead of them in hyperspace. But the problem is it's a 40-year-old ship that's that's been well maintained, but this is just one move too many, and it comes apart in the hyperspace lane. And the setup of this tragedy, have you ever heard anything like this before, Dan?
No, it's really, really powerful, and we'd wondered what something like that was going to be, but it was pretty monumentally powerful, I think.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And as they described, this is the moment that changes the High Republic forever. That the destruction of the Legacy Run is the catalyst for a galaxy-wide disaster. That fragments of this destroyed cargo vessel come out of hyperspace at super accelerated speeds, but they can be anywhere. That they can be at the Outer Rim, they can be at the galactic core, and this is when the Republic turns to the Jedi for help. Right? That's sort of the inciting event for what's going to happen with the High Republic.
Exactly. You need a good inciting event or initial incident to kind of keep the ball rolling and get people interested.
So, and again, this is why I wanted to talk with you, because I think again, based on that opening chapter, I'm there. I'm going to pick up Light of the Jedi the first day it's available to find out where this story goes from here. And it's interesting looking at the Star Wars films, or for that matter, shows like Star Wars Rebels, which have openings that pull you in, that immediately get you invested in the characters and the world. And that's the thing for me. I think I admire a lot about George Lucas. There's the famous story about he writes the Journal of the Wills, the adventures of Luke Starkiller, but it's at that point it's like a 12-chapter saga. And he wants to make a series of films based on this, so he walks up and down the journey of the Wills looking for the easiest audience entrance point to the saga, and eventually settles on A New Hope, which again has a grabber of an opening,
Mhm.
I don't think anybody could argue that. But some of the other you know films, not so much. I mean, though I know, you know, with your English teaching background and your love of structure and writing. In fact, that's why you sucked me into Crystal Skull again. Now I got to go back and look at it from a structurist point of view. But I mean, face it, Phantom Menace has some wonderful set pieces, but how do you
Mhm.
feel about that from a story point of view?
Well, I mean, it's always been the one out of all of them that's been the hardest to initially dive into. I remember seeing in the theater, of
Hmm.
course, the first showing and thinking, okay, this doesn't really seem familiar. This is a little stuffy, but okay, let's just kind of see what happens. And
Hmm.
it's the most politically, overtly political
Hmm.
of all of the films. So it's a little rocky, but over time, I think our brains just kind of put it together and it works great now. But it's certainly not for a casual viewer. I think it's a little bit harder as an inventory piece.
Hmm. Okay. And
Do you think the
I
same thing?
well, it just for me, the weird thing of it is that when you can look at it as a trilogy and get a sense of how the trade federation got played, basically,
Mhm.
to create what the emperor needed. It's fascinating as a whole story, but as it's a lot of exposition in that first
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of front loading. Um, on the other hand, I have to ask, what do you think of Force Awakens?
Force Awakens, I think is great because
Hmm.
I feel like it grabs you with the idea that Luke is gone. I remember
Hmm.
thinking, actually gasping out loud that Luke Skywalker was missing and
Hmm.
that he was sort of the MacGuffin or the mystery figure of mythology. And I thought that is a great way to grab us old geezers who liked Star Wars, since the late '70s, and we're invested in that character already. So you've got us glued in instantly. Whereas
Hmm.
Episode 1 doesn't really have a hook like that.
Okay. Well, for me, it's you know, th- there's a lot of the Force Awakens that is kind of a funhouse mirror version of A New Hope. I mean,
Yeah,
the
people have said that for sure.
mhm,
I've never really necessarily agreed, but I see the parallels.
mhm. Well, I mean, Maz's cantina versus the cantina in Tatooine, but face it, Maz changes the whole dynamic
Yeah,
of that environment. It's she's not we don't serve their kind here.
yeah.
Maz is pretty much we serve any kind here.
She's not
And
a gimmick. She adds to the story.
absolutely, absolutely, and likewise, it just and also face it in much the same way. I have to say the end of The Force Awakens is honestly my second favorite, film ending of the past, say, 20 years.
Oh, great.
The only one that kind of run parallels with that is the end of the second pirate movie, where in the
Oh,
last
sure.
30 seconds, Barbosa comes clomping downstairs, and where become my ship? And it's just sort of like, and the movie ends at the moment you're like, no,
And Captain
it's like,
Jack Sparrow, you think is about to be eaten by this massive creature?
yeah, I mean, it's just one of these things where it's like you want the next installment to begin immediately, and in much the same way, the fact that Ray finds Luke, and and at that moment, offers him his lightsaber, and the credits roll, and you're like, oh,
I
I got
love
to
it.
come back,
We had to wait 2 years too.
and then the kicker, that only you think about only kids today that now that the Skywalker saga has been complete, inside of a minute they can go into the very next film where he tosses the lightsaber over his shoulder, like meh, you
Yep.
know, it, and think of what a discombobulating moment that was, you know, when you watch the next installment of that trilogy, but. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing for me. You know, it's always that first part of the story that draws you in. And from the opening shot of New Hope, where you get the fleeing rebel ship, and you get then the impossibly large star destroyer chasing after them, and just the iconic moments of Leia hiding the message in R2, and then making their way through the battle to the escape pod. I mean, it was all just there's such economy there. There's no flab at all, and you have to wonder how much of that is George's storytelling, and let's be honest here, how much of that is Marsha's editing. Um, you know, so because that's the thing, that's my problem with the prequels is they're it's not as lean as the original trilogy. Don't get me wrong, they're wonderful buffets. Amazing visuals, fun characters, amazing action set pieces. But but not that thin, that really lean narrative that is constantly moving you forward.
Totally agree. It's a very unique way to do a story, and I don't know, I'm like you said, I'm think this is a good way to kind of wet our whistle for what we have to come in January, and my goodness, it can't come soon enough.
Yeah, I agree. Very, very much looking forward to this book. Likewise, very much looking forward to the season 2 of The Mandalorian, which and again, that's in a weird sort of way. I it's going to sound strange to say this, but I'm really happy that we're now in this post Skywalker saga era, because all bets are off. It just sort of, you can do things like what happened to the Legacy run and the impact that'll happen, that'll have on the Star Wars universe. And it'll be interesting to see where the Jedis were and how they got to where we were. Just as the prequels were getting underway, and likewise, it's going to be fascinating to watch how the Mandalorian, which is kind of in that hammock between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, and where they go from here.
True.
Well, anyway, speaking of where they go from here, Dan has places to go, so we need to wrap up this show. Okay, talk to me about what's been going on with Coffee with Kenobi.
Yeah, well, we've been continuing our Monday night Facebook Live show, 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on coffeewithkenobi.com/Facebook Live or facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi. On the regular show, we been looking, of course, at different things going on in the world of Star Wars. This week, we're going to chat with our lovely friend, Mr. Drew Taylor, about the Tartakovsky Clone Wars animated series. I feel like he'd be a great guy to talk about this because of his knowledge and understanding of how animation works anyway. And so that's going to be a ton of fun. It's been a good time, even though no movie on the horizon. There's always cool stuff to talk about on Coffee with Kenobi.
And what about Patreon? What are you doing over there?
Patreon, we over our CWK Prover podcast show, we just did 10 through 6 of our top 10 favorite songs of all time, and this weekend we're going to have the top 5 songs. And again, our top 5 and top 10 shows continue to get a lot of great attention and buzz, and people seem to be really enjoying them. So if you're interested, go to patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi.
All right, I got to check this out. Okay, our Set of the Fence, we got Disney Dish with Len Testa. In fact, Len is down on Disney World property right now, walking around, checking out some of the just opened resorts. In fact, he did, for a Bandcamp exclusive show, he just did a walk around of Bay Lake Towers and the Contemporary, and narrowly avoided being eaten by turkey buzzards, who evidently have taken over the Contemporary Hotel.
Oh, wow.
So just a warning there, folks, that, if you're going to get a room in the Garden Wing when they reopen, just, you might want to be upwind. Let's see. You mentioned Drew Taylor. He and I just recorded a new fine tuning and have to do a new one Friday or Saturday this week. By the way, we will be talking about this, and we were talking Disney Plus shows. The new Into the Unknown making of Frozen 2. If you liked Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, this is a show that's very much in that vein. In fact, in a weirder sort of way, it's a much sweatier group of people because, frankly, when they start the Frozen 2 story, it's not going well. They are like 9 months away from the premiere, and they haven't yet figured out who it is exactly who's talking to Elsa. The magic voice that's leading her around. It's
Oh
like
my
no idea
goodness.
who that is yet. So really well worth checking out. Let's see. We also have Universal Joint with Dustin Fuse. We're recording a brand new one of those this week. Likewise, Marvel Us Disney, which I do with Aaron Adams, the gentleman who edits a lot of the podcasts here. We also have I Want That, Michelle Valladolid. She just called me today. We're going to be talking about the what is it? The Silverado Vineyard, the Disney family vineyard up in Napa.
Oh, great.
And finally, of course, we have the show you're listening to right now, looking at Lucasfilm with Dan Zehr, who, again, I love that you take a story structure approach to these things. On the other hand, I really hate that it gave me a reason to go back to watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I'm telling you, Harrison Ford has terrific performance. I mean, the guy's in incredible shape for his age, and he just sells it. He subverts his role and still is the hero, and it's great.
Okay, I will. I'll go watch it. All right, folks. If you could do me a favor while I have to watch this movie, if you could help out Dan and I and head over to iTunes and not only rate and recommend looking at Lucasfilm, but likewise Coffee with Kenobi. That helps additional listeners find the show and that sort of thing. Likewise, if you really, really, really like what you're hearing here tonight, if you could head over to Bandcamp and subscribe. Beyond that, Dan, as always, I've been enjoying the stuff you're posting on social media. If folks are looking for you there, how do they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR on Twitter, and then Coffee with Kenobi's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and YouTube.
Okay, and our social media, let's see. Find us on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And I guess it's the news for now. So thanks for listening. And Dan and I will be back with a new Looking at Lucasfilm in 2 weeks or so. And hopefully by then we'll know what's going on with Walt Disney World.